Hello and welcome back to Therapy Wise. Today I have a very special guest, my friend Cathleen McCaffery. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hello, I am so honored to be here with you, Jenny. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I just cannot wait for everything we're about to talk about. We had such a long chat before we hit record that we many times kept saying, we've got to hit record. We've got to hit record. So, Kathleen, I would love for you to start with who you are, what you do in the world, so people, our listeners, can have some context to what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, totally. Well, I would introduce myself as a sort of 5D multidimensional being who contains multitudes, but some of those, currently I'm a graduate student at Harvard. I am getting a master's in education, leadership, organizations, and entrepreneurship. I've been researching ethics and character in higher ed for about the past year. And I also own a global boutique college admissions and life path consulting company, The Advisory. So we work with high school students, college students, people who are older who want to go back to school or sort of like reinvent themselves and help them craft a life path that feels aligned and take the necessary action to get there, whether that's coming to Harvard or going to fashion school in Japan or starting a business. And I also have a deep sort of multifaceted spiritual practice through which I met you, Jenny. I've worked with shamans, healers, I've traveled the world, lived abroad and throughout the US. And I'm very passionate about this concept that sort of elevating our own consciousness and coming into our own essence and who we truly are has this reverberating impact to sort of heal humanity. So just put it out there, I guess. And that's really where my passion lies, whether it's in education or interpersonal relationships. My purpose is sort of to do that myself and then kind of be like a lighthouse for others to do the same.
Oh, wow. What an introduction. So many different threads we can pull on there. So now I was just reflecting to you, Kathleen, that I just see so much evolution and growth in you. You've always been just such an elevated person and so inspirational. I think you very regularly receive the feedback that you are an inspiration to other people. And recently I've been watching you, and your magnetism has been just absolutely off the charts. So I would love to hear, what have you been doing in order to really fully step into your own magnetic essence?
What a great question. Yeah, well, they say it takes 10 years to become an overnight success, right?
I
So
love
many
that
people,
quote.
that's my favorite quote because, yes, I've sort of unlocked this new level of creativity and magnetism, and I've been getting all these messages of like, wow, it seems like everything's changed for you in the past 6 months, and oh my gosh. And I've said yes, 6 months or 12 years, really, if you think about it. And so I kind of recently came up with this analogy. Maybe I should read you a little poem. Let me see if I can find it that I wrote about this. I've been having these conversations with my partner, who's a physicist, and basically the sort of concept I came up with is what's called the dark trampoline, which I sort of view as like the shadow, I guess, in Jungian terminology, is that the way to sort of unlock creativity and magnetism is to just sort of be bouncing on this dark trampoline of the shadow, like kind of tapping into like all your darkness, challenges in life. And then sometimes like you'll bounce so hard that like you'll break through the center and sort of just like descend into the shadow fully and have maybe like a dark period where everything seems to be going wrong, or like you're really out of alignment and doing work that exhausts you, or in bad relationships. And then you kind of come back and you bounce. But when you bounce enough, then you can just gain so much momentum that you ascend into this lightness. And that's sort of what I feel has happened for me. Like, I am an experiential learner, for those of you who are into human design, a 3-5 profile. And like life for us, 3-5s, life is our greatest teacher. Like, we learn by experience, or as I say, for some people, God or your spiritual power can like whisper in your ear and you listen. for some of us, we need to be like dragged naked through a bed of thorns for miles until we're like, oh, okay, I get the lesson. And that's kind of how I am. I'm the drag through the bed of thorns type. And then I'm like, wow, like I'm bleeding all over. Like maybe I shouldn't be here instead of just listening to the little whisper. So I think I've just taken such an experiential route through life and moved to the Middle East after college. It was in a like a terrible marriage that I got out of, and like have just done so many things that were kind of painful and challenging, but like gave me this momentum on that trampoline so that now I've accumulated all these lessons and I'm now sort of living in this lightness. Not 100% of the time, like we're still human, but most of the time. And that's really what you're seeing.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you remember that. I'm also a 3-5 profile.
Of course you are. That's why we're friends.
And that explains, we were talking about some of our dark times before we hopped on, and that explains why we've both been through some dark times. So is it your opinion that in order to ascend fully into the light, that we do have to descend as far into the shadow as we ascend up into the light?
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to talk about this. Well, I think historically, yes. I think if we look at what's going on in the world too, yes. I think we have had to have a lot of chaos, war, violence on a collective level and also on an individual level in order to gain that momentum. But my belief is that we're sort of at this like great awakening. And I think perhaps this is why there's a lot of chaos and trauma individually and collectively in the world, where we're going to transcend that. And I see this most clearly through the lens of school and education, just because that's where I've spent most of my career. But I feel like the system of school as it's set up really around the world is to like block children from uncovering their unique zone of genius and like really just turn them into obedient robots. Like it doesn't, the whole system of school makes no sense if you're trying to like tap into each child's unique essence. And then you have to go through this whole deconditioning process as an adult to figure out, like, wait, who really am I? Like, oh, I don't have to just be an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher. Like, I can be a shaman or something else. What if it wasn't so hard? You know, what if we didn't have to go through that deconditioning? You could just be in your essence from the get go. And I have a almost 6-year-old son, and I see this with him because I've cultivated an environment where his genius isn't blocked from emerging. So he has that like pure access to it now. And I think that's where we're headed as a society, which is why I don't worry too much about like all the terrible things happening because I feel like, okay, like collectively things are going to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that happening.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I really do. I really feel that, even if we think about 200 years ago, there was a lot of shit going on in the world that was actually, you know, arguably worse than what's happening right now. I actually think
Mm,
we're always in a process of evolution and that things are improving. And of course, in any given moment, at any given time, for any given person, it can seem like they're not feeling that right now, right? But that is what I see happening and where I see we're going. So I absolutely agree with you about that. I'm curious, so how do you cultivate that in your son? What do you do as a parent?
oh man, yeah. I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, but
Oh, I think you're the perfect person to ask. You're
perhaps
so good at this, Kathleen. So that's why I'm asking you, because I feel that you do this so well and you're just being humble right now.
probably. Yeah, I think the 3D elements of parenting I find challenging. I mean, just before this interview, I realized, oh, I forgot to bring my lunch. I forgot to pack lunch for my son, but luckily I manifested a school that's directly across the street from my house, so I could just walk over and drop it off. No problem. I think what I really enjoy about parenting is sort of this element. It's not so much the like dishes and laundry, all that stuff, but it's the okay, how do I cultivate this child's essence, and how do I help him like discover and stay in who he is? And so there's a lot of different ways I do that. A lot is through fashion and clothing, which is something I've been playing with a lot myself as well. Like he has a highly curated wardrobe. I'm not someone who will just like run to Target and pick up some clothes, or like I'm kind of weird about hand-me-downs too, as I'm just like, I feel like these have the energy of the person who wore them before. And if I don't know who that was, it kind of like gives me pause. Not that I don't mean to sound elitist in that way, but like I'm very intentional about sort of like the items we have in our house, clothing, toys, books. I think as he's getting older, it's a little more challenging because he has sort of his own preferences, but like I sort of curate different moods in his clothes, and he has like a little wardrobe where I kind of line them all up and then allow him to choose and play. We have a lot of books around his interest. So he's obsessed with maps and travel and different places. So we have all these map books. It's like whenever he has an interest, I just like dive in and cultivate it. So he was obsessed with like soldiers and things like that recently. And I'm kind of a pacifist and felt like, well, I really don't want to play into this. But for him, it was more like, Mom, I want to hear about like British soldiers in the olden days, or like this ancient army. And it was more about like setting them up on a map and like their adornments. And I had a dream that he was like a general in a past life,
But
and thought,
I was just
okay,
going to say, Kathleen,
let's
I'm
do
like, oh my
it.
God, I'm really receiving the insight that he was
Yes.
in a past life. He was part of some sort of army. And then you said that.
Totally. Right. That's what my partner said too. He was like, I think she was like an ancient general in like the Middle East. And I'm like, yeah, he was born in Dubai. That would make sense. So I just kind of go with the flow. And like we have a routine, but I don't stick to it that much. And I have found that to be challenging, like blending in with other parent community, because a lot of parents are like, this is what we do, and this is the schedule. And I'm like, well, we just have these like adventure days. Like on the weekends, we'll just say, like, well, what do you want to do today? Do we want to just take the train? Do we want to like drive to an unknown location? How can we just like play and have fun? And so we end up doing all these like non-kid things. And he's like great, behaves really well at restaurants and like loves travel and airplanes. And I'm like, yeah, I just kind of cultivate him as like a full person, and we do things in a very non-traditional way.
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's absolutely inspirational. And I think that
Oh, thank you.
you embody the energy of creativity and wonder so well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a lot of bouncing on that dark trampoline to get to creativity and wonder. So it feels fun to be here now. It feels like, as Gay Hendricks, who's one of my mentors, says, easy world. Like, this is easy world. Let your learning be easy. Like, life can just be easy, can be full of ease. And you access ease through wonder and curiosity,
Yeah.
creativity. It's just play.
And I know Gay Hendricks talks a lot about the genius zone. And so is that something that you are always, aspiring to be living and working and playing in your genius zone?
Yes. So one of the big things is like, how can I live most of my life in my genius zone? And this has been something that I've been playing with for maybe the past 6 to 9 months. I really wanted to go back to graduate school for a while, although the reasons I wanted to go were kind of different than like, I don't know. I had two reasons. It's my dream to sort of create a new model for K through 12 school and open them all over the world. I'm still quite passionate about that. And my other dream was to sort of grow my current company. And I had a kind of funky record as an undergrad. And so I didn't really know, even though this is my career path, like whether I would get in or not. I ended up applying to Harvard and a bunch of other Ivy Leagues and some schools in Scandinavia, and I got in everywhere. And I chose to come to Harvard. And I got here, and then I kind of quickly got sucked into like what Gay Hendricks would call exogenous world, where things are run on adrenaline. I'm like, oh, everyone is so busy here all the time. There's always a world leader or some super important person to meet. And everyone is always so packed. And I just got like sucked into that. And I started feeling like, oh, now I need a PhD. And like, I'm only going to be here for a year or two. And that's not enough. There's so much I need to like, I just constantly felt like my time here is ending and I haven't learned what I need to learn. So I started doing all these things that one would do if they were going to get a PhD, like doing research and then I realized like maybe at the beginning of this year, every time I think about this, I feel completely dead inside. And I am living so far out of my genius.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing these research positions where frankly I'm getting paid like what I earned as like a 20-year-old nanny in college like 12 years ago. You're paid very poorly, but they're so prestigious that everyone just does them. But I thought like what am I doing here? And and the work was interesting, but I just got to see like the machinations of academia and I thought this was my genius and it's really not. There's a lot of bureaucracy. Things move very slowly and you might have some creativity, but then the creativity is quickly like squashed by this giant machine. And I started getting sick and just had this awakening of like, whoa, I am so far out of my genius, but I thought I was in my genius because everyone is like, oh, you're getting a PhD, you're going to get a PhD at Harvard. Of course, that's in your genius. Well, actually, a lot of people who are doing that are not that happy. So I let that go. I just quit what I was doing. I gave up this goal. I told the people I was working with, like, hey, I'm actually changed my mind, not going to do this anymore. Everyone was kind of shocked because in exogenous world, this is what you do. And I started really playing with like, who am I? What is my essence? Who am I underneath all the personas of like the good girl, the overachiever, who I think I need to be? And I've tapped into, I call her Catherine the Great, or that's what she calls herself. Sometimes Lady D after Princess Diana. She has many faces, and how would I describe her as a floating, effervescent time traveler.
Mm.
That's who she is. She's like ice skating through black holes, and she's just very free, and that's my genius zone. And
Mm-hmm.
so now
That's so
I'm
you. Like, I think when you made
yes,
that switch, that was when I was like, what's going on with Kathleen? You know, you just felt so in your essence and in just such a beautiful and magnetic place. And I think it was that timeline where I really was beginning to see,
totally.
yeah, just online, just in your social media, just noticing that. You know, I think the university system, the way it's run right now, is absolutely a part of the old world order. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're in those environments, you know, I've experienced this in many different environments, whether at university or in different jobs or placements or friend groups, you know, you start to just like feel that energy and you start to like fall into those patterns that, okay, this is the way the world is. And then when you
Yes.
manage to see, oh, wait, this doesn't fit for me. This isn't who I am. This isn't actually what we need to be doing. And you pull yourself out of it, you can look back at that old version of you and see like, oh my gosh, I was so not in my own power, my own knowings when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So,
it seems like so normal because everyone's like, well, you're at Harvard, of course. And it's like, well, but why? Why are we doing all this? Why are we here?
and I think Harvard especially, it's amplified because it's such a prestigious and elite organization. And so you know, when you're in a situation where it's like, oh, you get all these accolades for it, it's hard for people to understand the choice to step out of that. Yeah.
Totally. Totally. It's very unusual. At the same time, since I've been playing with this, so many cool opportunities have happened, and people come up to me and they're like, Kathleen, like, I'm just obsessed with you, or like, you've inspired me. Or I had one conversation with someone and it inspired her to like pitch her nonprofit for this competition. She won $25,000. She said, like, yeah, I never would have done it had we not had that conversation. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this is easy world. Like, not writing grants that take years to get approved. Like, easy world is just being who you are, and then having that allow other people to become who they are. Like, that I've discovered is my genius, and now I'm reorienting my life to like live there most of the time.
Oh, that's beautiful. So, you know, when I was reading your bio, you know, I know you mostly as a college admissions mentor and guide, and you have added life path consultant. And I was like, oh my God, that's so Kathleen, life path consultant. You know, that just seems to be really capturing who you are. So I love that you're, you know, expanding and growing and, you know, allowing yourself to evolve. So I would love for you to speak about your perspectives on manifestation.
Oh my gosh, yes, we could speak about this for hours. So I guess I first got into this concept of manifestation maybe before the pandemic, 2019, I think. I had just left a marriage. I had a young child who was about a year old, and my life, I went from having this life where I owned a business in Dubai that I'd co-founded when I was very young, like 24 years old. I had like this 3-story house with an elevator. I bought myself a Range Rover. Like, from the outside, you think like, wow, this is pretty impressive. I was 25 years old. I had all these employees who were much double my age. Like, but I was also working nonstop all the time. I was in a really unhappy relationship, maybe a toxic relationship. I don't know that it was unhappy. It was just not healthy. And so from the outside, things kind of looked good. From the inside, not so great. And then I left that, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, and I left my company, I left my business, I co-founded it with my ex-husband. And so leaving that relationship sort of was a decision to like leave all this material stuff behind. And that was really hard for me. And like, I'm someone who likes her creature comforts. And I also worked very hard. Like, I built this sort of company from scratch. And how will I go from this to just starting over? And I just realized, like, okay, I did this once. I can do it again, and I can actually maybe do it better. Um, so what would that look like? And at the same time, my reality had drastically changed kind of overnight. And I found, I think, Catherine Zankina, Manifestation Babe. And I started following her stuff. And then I had like saved up enough money to do her course. And I did her course, and my mind was blown. If anyone isn't familiar, highly recommend her, because she talked about like the science behind manifestation, which kind of appealed to like the logical part of me, but also the spiritual aspect. And she's very down to earth and kind of approachable. So I found it easily digestible. I think as a child, I had always, like, I was raised Catholic, but I was always interested in like spirituality and religion. I remember like hiding in my laundry room reading this book on ancient Egypt at maybe 9 years old. I was like fascinated by hieroglyphics and Cleopatra. And so I always kind of had this curiosity, and I I didn't really like being Catholic, but I liked praying, and like I liked this concept. Like, I always thought like I can just talk to God. I don't need to go to church. I can just sit in my closet and talk to God, and that's it. But manifestation, I guess, unlocked for me when I got into Catherine Zankina's work. And then I just dove in. And then I found like Makosi, who's the shaman Jenny and I both worked with, and like all these other, I started just reading a ton of books like Neville Goddard and uh what is that thing? Napoleon Hill, I think.
Think
All
and
these
Grow
different
Rich.
things.
Mhm.
Think and Grow Rich, yes. And I had them by my bedside. and I would like write the mantra. I don't know what the mantra is, but there's a mantra. I wrote it in there and I was like, this is the exact amount of money I'm going to earn. And it was so much more than what I was making. That didn't make sense. And it pretty much all started happening down to the T. It was like, okay, shortly after that, I was living with my mom. I'd saved up enough money. I moved into this beautiful apartment with my son in the dream neighborhood. And it was like highly competitive market. And the landlady said, well, I just prayed and closed my eyes and picked your name out of all the applicants.
And this is in
Like,
LA, you know, it's not
this is in LA.
not cheap real estate in that area.
No. And it's highly competitive. And it was like the perfect apartment in the perfect neighborhood near the school I wanted to send my son. And I moved in and I owned a company. And at that time it was very new. And I'm like, I don't even know how much money I'm going to make next month. Like, will I be able to pay the rent here? Like, I really don't know. But I just like leapt and continue to trust the net will appear and that all this manifestation work I was doing would work. And it did. It was like the next month I earned the amount of money I had the whole year before in 1 month.
Oh my God, Kathleen, I didn't
And I'm
know
like,
all of this. This is
oh,
so incredible.
yes,
I'm not surprised. I kind of met you just after this experience.
yes.
And yeah, I definitely felt the power and the magic and the energy in you.
Well, thank you. Well, then things kind of went, then I went back on a trampoline for a bit. Like it's been sort of ebb and flow. And I guess now I think manifestation in that traditional sense helped me a lot when I really needed it and when I didn't have a lot of belief in myself or in the world. Like I didn't necessarily believe the world was like a wise, kind universe. It helped me rekindle that. But now my belief on manifestation is different. And I think being attached to this belief that we can create whatever we want actually caused me a lot of pain because when things I was manifesting weren't showing up in my reality and life got kind of hard, I felt like, well, what am I doing wrong? Like, why isn't this happening? Or like, I thought this was gonna happen and it's not. Or like, and so I was in a lot of pain and like self-loathing. And now I see sort of beyond manifesting is like what I call conscious co-creation, where you're just connected with this divine. I use the word God, but anything else could be substituted. Like I have an intentional practice of connecting with the divine, God, and then I am co-creating. Things are appearing in my reality that are way beyond what I would put on my manifestation list, like, or my vision. I'm very clear on what I desire, and so many of those things have happened, but also so many things that are way, way better. And when I go back to read my journals, I think, okay, some of this that's more amorphous, like I want a loving, creative partner who wants to travel, great. But some things where like I am going to be training college counseling staff around the world and owning this type of company, I think, well, did I really want to manifest that, or was that just the best I thought I could have?
Yeah. I think there's always what's coming for us. Like there's what our conscious minds are thinking, oh, I would love that. Like I remember putting on my manifestation list, like, I want a course with this many people in it, or I want this many
Yeah.
email list subscribers. And it's like, you know what, those things so didn't matter. And actually, like, had I experienced some of those things, it would have taken me off the track that was actually best for me. So what I was manifesting with my conscious thoughts was nothing compared to where I was actually heading, which I didn't always seem to be on track for that. At certain times I would have,
Mm,
oh, I'm off track, but actually everything was unfolding beautifully behind the scenes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we don't trust that, then it's easy to get attached to like what's happening in the moment feels like, oh my gosh, my house is on fire. But maybe like your house is being burned because there's like a beautiful new house across the street that's being built just for you, but you can't see it yet because the land is just barren right now.
Oh, can I tell you a funny story about that? Because it's
Yes.
like literal in certain respects. So, and when I sold my company last year, I was going through the process, and at a certain point, I realized I have to get a new office space because, I'm not going to be working here anymore.
Mm,
And I was thinking about like, okay, what do I want? I wanted to be in my city, which is a fairly small suburban city. There's not a lot of office space available. And all of the commercial spaces, I was like, oh, these are so like cold, and they just didn't feel to be aligned with the energy of my new business, the Wisdom Portal. And so I decided, you know what? I really want just a residential condo that I can go to and work out of,
mm,
and, have people come. I wasn't seeing a lot of clients in person. A lot of my work is online, and I really limit the people that I'm working with to, perfectly aligned, and it's fairly exclusive. So it's not like there's constant people coming in and out. And so I had this vision of, okay, I want to walk in. I want, you know, windows all around. I want, a washroom here. I want a bedroom and a washroom here. Like I envisioned it in my mind. And I
mm.
remember I said it to my sister, and she was like, Jenny, I looked at real estate in the city. There's nothing like that. And I was like, we'll see. And I
We'll
went
see.
I went to one space. Like I had been in talks with a few condo people, but I came to one space, looked at it, and I was like, I'll take this. And it was fully furnished, and it was exactly to the T
Mm,
what I had asked for and what I had envisioned. And it was available exactly when I needed it. Like it was just such a beautiful manifestation. And in this past year, so this is where I'm at right now. You can see there's like beautiful windows all around.
oh, there are windows all around.
Yeah,
I love that. Oh, and it's so much cozier than like a little office.
totally. And just in the past couple of weeks, I received an email that the landlord is moving back in. And so I have to get out. And, I
Mm,
had the immediate like, oh my God, no, I love this place. But then I realized, you know what? I needed this last year. I needed, this physical space. I actually don't need a space anymore. I have a beautiful office
mm.
that I can work from. And with the few clients that I see in person, I can reno it and they can come there, and that will simplify my life and actually be, a beautiful fit at this stage. So, it's just is unfolding in just such a perfect way.
I love that story. That feels like, yes, such an easy world perspective. And it's so contradictory to like what we learn in school and society. Where like you have your job for 40 years and then you do your things like, oh, there's this buoyancy and like flexibility and bounciness about living life this way.
Yeah. Now, before
Mm.
we hit record, we were talking about, I had a recent experience with someone who I thought was a really wonderful mentor for me, and I have discovered that what I was meant to learn from this person wasn't what I thought I was meant to learn, and it was, what looked like a negative experience from the outside is actually a really wonderful growth opportunity for me. And you had said, oh my God, I've totally experienced that too. So I would love to hear, like, as much as you would like to share about that, what your experience was like with this type of situation.
Yeah, definitely. Oh God, where to even start? So I had, and I'm not going to kind of share their name in like,
No.
keeping things anonymous, but I found this sort of practice that I really liked because the underpinnings of it, it's sort of like a somatic work, breath work, uh, also like divination. The underpinnings of it were like, you don't need any systems or anything to like connect with the divine. It's sort of this Ram Dass, be your own guru mentality, which I have come to really cherish. It's like we don't need mentors, you don't need anyone else. All these things are like accoutrements. You can learn from other people and it can be beautiful, but if people aren't teaching you how to like access the divine on your own, then something's off. So that's why I like this practitioner, because it was a method to do that. But even as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, but you don't need a method to do that. I mean, I've realized there are certain things like gratitude journaling, which I used to do, that I don't do anymore, because I'm just like, I just live in gratitude. I just am experiencing gratitude. I am being gratitude and radiating it out. And like writing down 3 things every day feels like force.
It's training wheels on the bike, really. You know,
Yeah,
it
it's
was
training
helpful
wheels.
for you at that point, but you're beyond that now.
Totally. And I think, it's hard to get beyond that because it takes a lot of like dark trampoline bouncing.
I love this dark trampoline
Ah,
analogy.
yes, take it. And so I had joined this program and I was trying to get this person I'm seeing like to join it with me. I'm like, you need to do this methodology with me so we can have this amazing relationship. And he was like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not really into systems. This feels like a system. And then I thought, okay, like this is someone I kind of trust. So like, why is he so not into this? Let me explore it more. And I kind of started like poking around and realized, oh, there's some holes here that don't quite feel right. And I realized I had been like thinking that I needed this methodology to access the divine. Like, oh, this is the method where you don't need a method, and I must learn this. And I kind of connected it to my son too. It was like, I need this for like parenting, I need this for my clients. Like, I need to be able to help other people just access their genius, and this is the way to do it. And I realized like that's kind of contradictory to the whole thing. And also this isn't feeling good anymore. And I was about to start this course that I had paid for in full. And I emailed them and said, you know what? I'm actually not going to do the course. If you feel it's in your integrity to offer me a refund, that would be great, since it hadn't started yet. And I'd done other things with them before. And I wrote a really nice email, and I thought if someone sent me this email, like I would probably just say, okay, fine. And I got back this like tirade, this like really, really long, angry email about how ridiculous this email even was, and how like I need this method, and like how even asking for a refund was out of integrity, and like a whole bullet point list. And I'm like, whoa, this is clear that I was feeling off. And then it like, we expect you to show up to the calls. And yeah,
After
and there
that
were
email?
multiple, oh
Wow.
yeah, there were multiple email exchanges until I had to like block them on all technological and social platforms, because I was just getting this like such ferocity. And I realized, okay, I have tapped into this new level of light and magnetism. A lot of powerful things are unfolding in my life in a big way, like in terms of money, relationships, and like this was a program that just wants to sort of siphon that from people through this system and use it for the system itself to gain money, status, etc. And it's kind of cult-like. I would describe it as cult-like. Yeah, that's I guess what a cult is. And I thought, oh, like this is quite terrible, but extricated myself from it, and it really helped me learn that like, one, the whole purpose is to be our own guru, and two, oh gosh, what was I gonna say? I don't know, I lost my train of thought, but basically that like we need to eradicate all kind of systems. Like that's sort of where I'm feeling like everyone has access to this divine genius.
Yeah.
And all our job is as mentors or people is to like help remove all the conditioning and help them see that so they can do it on their own. if your work is all about keeping people in these programs for the rest of their lives, then you're not really serving anyone and you're actually having less impact in the world.
Yeah. Oh, it's so relevant to my recent experience where the person that I was interacting with, who I really trusted, who I have followed for, you know, over 10 years and really admire and thought wasn't like this, had a very kind of similar type of, basically, to me, the underlying energy is disempowering, rather than
Mm-hmm.
empowering the students to, experience the divine on their own, to kind of hold back and require that you follow them. But, to me, that is a massive red flag. And, there is nothing wrong with mentorship. Like, I know you believe in that and have experienced that in a beautiful way. And so have I. However, I think an evolved mentor always encourages us to listen to our own discernment, to have our own connection with source or God, and would never engage in a disempowering message of any sort.
Totally.
Yeah. Wow. So
Mm.
moving forward, I do want to hear a little bit more from you about your perspectives on academics. And, we touched on this a little bit in our discussion about your son, but what do you think would be an evolved way for our educational institutions to be promoting learning in our children, adolescents, young adults, and beyond?
Oh man, how much time do you have, Jenny? Because I could talk about this for days. I am so passionate about this.
Yes.
Um, okay, let me give you the condensed version. Well, it's been my great honor to have worked with Howard Gardner at Harvard doing research, who is a cognitive psychologist and created this theory of multiple intelligences. That's not really where our work lies. He's done many things, but I think that was sort of the first time that society awoken to this fact of like, oh, kids don't all learn in the same way. The way that school is set up is for everyone to be exactly the same, and like that doesn't resonate with most kids. And so I really dove into like the philosophy of education. That was sort of a big reason why I wanted to come to Harvard. And I did a lot of reading on this before I came here as well. I'm like, what is education actually? Like, what is sort of the purpose of it? And this concept of school as we experience it now is actually quite recent in the history of education. Like for most of the history of humanity, children didn't go to somewhere called school. They just sort of learned from their parents. They learned whatever their parents did. They learned trades, or if you were quite wealthy or in like a position of royalty or aristocracy, you would have tutors and sort of learn what you need to do that role. It was very like learning was role based, which I also think is problematic. However, there's this Indian educational philosopher who I love, Krishnamurti, and there are Krishnamurti schools in India, one in California, some in the UK as well. And the basic tenet of this philosophy is that the purpose of education, loosely, is to help each child like access their own higher level of consciousness. And big part of it is self-sufficiency. They like spend a lot of time outdoors. They learn to grow their own food. They learn sort of like if you were like all alone on an island, how would you survive? They learn about botany. And his belief is that if we all elevate our own consciousness, that will reverberate out and elevate the consciousness of the planet. And it might take 1,000 years or more. This is a long game. It's not a quick fix. And that's something I really resonate with and sort of, at least at this moment, I still see myself wanting to sort of create alternative schools in the future. And that's sort of the goal. It's like schools should be just a container for each child to tap into their essence. And if one kid wants to be learning about the ancient British soldiers, and another kid wants to be reading Sufi poetry, and another wants to be like doing physics experiments, then school should be a container to have the materials and resources for them to all do that. And you can actually do this very cheaply without like lesson plans and forcing them all to be on the same timeline. And there's a lot of research that shows a lot of kids develop dyslexia because they're forced to read before they're ready. So they develop this anxiety about reading.
Really?
There's,
Never heard.
yeah, it's so interesting. And there's like a lot of alternative, kind of like fairly alternative schools just don't even teach reading. They allow kids to read when they're ready. And most of those kids end up being quite successful. Like, so a lot of them are even writers or professors. And when you're 25, no one cares. Did you learn to read at 4, 7, or 10? I think, every child really has so much innate genius, even with like neurodivergence. I see it really just a different lens to see the world. That there's actually a lot of value in being neurodivergent, but we've sort of demonized it and pathologized it because it doesn't fit into our systems, which were created for the oppressors, not necessarily the individual.
Most of the spiritual teachers and mentors and healers that I know are neurodivergent. And, I don't think that that is a coincidence. So, what would you say to people who, I think about a lot of the things that I learned in school. I was like the ultimate like little soldier in school where it was like, oh, I need to learn this. Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. And I would just like work super hard with whatever it is that they told me to do and did very well at it. But I can see now I'm like, okay, that didn't foster any creativity or, personal expression or anything like that. But I can look back now and see that I never would have, let's say, taken certain things in school had I had the choice. Like, let's say, algebra or geometry. I might have been like, no, thanks. I love to write. I love to read. But sometimes those things, I'll be doing something. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's an algebra equation. And I can do it because I learned it in school. And so, what is your perspective on that? That like there are sometimes some like basic skills and knowledge that do come in handy that many children maybe wouldn't gravitate toward, but also are very beneficial for them.
Yes. So my perspective on this is quite radical. And there's schools called the Sudbury schools that I love, that I would totally send my son to if the nearest one wasn't an hour away, where there's no curriculum, no grades. It's mixed age from 4 to 18, and the kids can just do whatever they want all day. However, they're highly curated spaces. So there's like a kitchen, there's a music studio, there's a podcast studio, there's a lot of outdoor space. And how it works there is that, okay, well, the kids aren't learning math in that way. A group of kids will get together and decide, we want money to go on a field trip. And they have to fundraise money for anything they want to do themselves. And they might say, okay, like we're interested in cooking, or one of us is a great baker. So what if we did a bake sale? Okay, so how are we going to figure out how many ingredients we need, or what we need to buy, or how much money we need to make? Oh, well, we might need to learn math. And then they're not teachers, they're just adults, and they'll say, okay, this is our plan, this is what we want to do. And adults can say, like, great, in order to do this, you're going to need to learn addition, subtraction, these things. And they'll learn what in traditional schools might take a whole year in like a month or 2 months, and then immediately put those skills into practice. So they're learning adding, subtraction, multiplication, etc., by planning a bake sale for the community, by doing their own grocery shopping, by starting, a little business. And I feel like that way of learning is sort of embodied, and that the knowledge is like with you in a deeper way than if you're just memorizing worksheets.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. I absolutely love that. Like is that the concept that many call unschooling?
Unschooling is, I would say, more removed, in that with unschooling, you might not even go to a school like that. You just sort of like move throughout life,
Mhm.
which I like that concept, but I find it's like it's a little too loose for me in that my philosophy is more that like we should create like curated environments for children around their interests because there are some things they might be into that they might not know even exist. And then if they don't like it, just kind of move to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So, Kathleen, I would love for you to share with our audience what is it? So, if they were interested in working with you, what type of work do you do? How could you work with people in any capacity that you offer?
Yes, definitely. So things with my work are kind of changing right now. I do currently work with high school and college students doing this unique blend that I've created of admissions consulting and life path consulting. I work with a very small number of clients in that capacity per year. And then I have a team who does this work as well. So if you fall into that category of listeners and you're wanting that, we work with students applying to universities in the US, Asia, the UK, Canada, and Europe. And then I also work with sort of a wider range of people in what I call life path consulting, and that's just done through a single session. And you can feel it's on my website, theadvisoryla.com, or you can reach out on Instagram. I'm at Cathleen.McCaffery, but it will probably be in the show notes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Kathleen.
Thank
It was such a
you.
pleasure to have you.
This was the highlight of my day, and it felt like total genius in essence. So thank you, Jenny.